supernatural predators rarely need to overpower you physically. In many cursed locations, they hunt for a fractured mind. Take the case of four friends: Sahil, Chirag, Arun, and Samai. Until a few months ago, Samai was the life of the party. That changed when his younger brother was killed in a violent vehicle collision during a school trip. The sudden loss left Samai entirely shattered. Hoping to pull Samai out of his deep depression, the group packed their bags and drove up to Manali. This vibrant, sunlit town nestled right in the Himalayan mountains is the perfect picture of safety and escape. But a grieving mind does not heal on a travel itinerary. Samai's unresolved trauma acted as a massive emotional blind spot, leaving him uniquely exposed to anything looking for a way in. You can put hundreds of miles between yourself and the site of a tragedy. However, changing your physical geography offers zero protection against your own psychological vulnerabilities. After a few days of sightseeing, the group decided to leave the populated valley and drive up to the Rotang Pass. These cloudy, imposing peaks are incredibly isolated, sitting high above the tree line. Before they left, their hotel receptionist gave them a strict, urgent directive. They needed to be back from the pass before 6 p.m. The authorities often attribute the frequent nighttime deaths on these roads to hypothermia or simple driving accidents, but the locals know exactly what the name Rotang translates to: the Valley of Death, or literally a pile of corpses. They believe a deceptive ancient entity rules the road after dark. The four young men from the city laughed off the warning. They assumed it was a tourist trap myth and drove straight up into the mountains without a second thought. That specific blend of intellectual arrogance and skepticism gave the mountain's unseen residents exactly what they needed: willing targets driving right into their territory. By the time they decided to head back, it was past 9 p.m. A thick, blinding fog had rolled in, forcing Arun to crawl the car forward at a dangerous 30 kilometers per hour. One wrong turn on a sheer drop like this meant a fatal plunge into the valley below. Through the headlights, they spotted a milestone that read Manali 28 kilometers. Sitting right next to it in the freezing Himalayan night was a man wearing nothing but a thin white dhoti, a traditional loose loincloth. They drove in tense silence for another 20 minutes. Then the headlights illuminated the exact same stone, Manali 28 kilometers. They were caught in a spatial loop. The entity used perception probing to scan their minds, throwing out hallucinations to trigger a response. Sahil saw the freezing man, Chirag saw a girl, and Arun saw a horse. But Samai saw something entirely different. The entity systematically tested their individual fears to find which specific trauma would allow it to bypass their will. Instead of haunting a specific physical rock, it looked for a psychological opening. The entity found its mark. Samai suddenly dropped into a deep, catatonic trance, staring out the window and repeating that someone out there needed their help. Outside the vehicle, a 15-year-old boy materialized in the fog. He was covered in dirt, his face battered and bruised from a severe accident. Arun accelerated, but the physics of the Intemptor completely broke down. The violently injured boy was effortlessly keeping pace alongside a car moving at 40 kilometers per hour. The entity had pulled the image of Samai's deceased younger brother straight from his grieving mind. By mimicking the exact source of Samai's trauma, the creature bypassed every rational defense the young man had left. Completely entranced by the sight of his brother, Samai reached over, rolled down his window, and smiled warmly at the horrific figure outside. His panicked friends desperately fought with the central controls before flooring the accelerator to escape. The looping road served as a hunting ground designed to disorient the group. It isolated Samai until his specific grief functioned as an invitation for the entity to take control. Barely holding it together, the friends finally reached their hotel in Manali. They locked the doors, shut the windows, and collapsed into their beds, entirely convinced they had left the danger up on the mountain. At 3:30 in the morning, Sahil jolted awake. A haunting, familiar sound was echoing through the dark room. A gentle childhood lullaby, Chanda Hetu. Sahil found Samai standing rigid in front of the bathroom mirror. His eyes were blood red, and deep, invisible hands seemed to be pressing into his neck, leaving angry strangulation marks across his skin. Samai slowly turned to his terrified friends. Speaking with the innocent, high-pitched voice of a small child, he smiled and asked if they would let him in when he knocked on the window. Locking the solid wooden doors of the hotel room offered zero protection. Samai had already opened the door hours ago, carrying the entity directly inside his own mind. At daybreak, the desperate Friendz dragged Samai to a local pandit, a Hindu priest and spiritual scholar. The moment the pandit looked at the boy, he diagnosed the exact nature of the spiritual breach. The priest explained that an ancient, opportunistic predator had recognized Samai's profound sorrow. It wore the mask of his dead brother, perfectly wrapping itself around Samai's grief to achieve full possession of his body. Severing that connection required a brutal physical purge. The pandit performed a violent exorcism, which only ended when Samai violently vomited a thick, black, tar-like liquid onto the floor. The real danger of cursed locations lies in the unresolved trauma the visitors carry into the dark with them. In the Valley of Death, profound psychological grief acts as a blinding, glowing beacon for the predators waiting in the fog.